Right, I'm going to go over some reasons why base clear can be a much better way to paint, and reason why they're using it all in new cars is because it is really better than some of the old systems. And I'm going to go over reasons why the single stage is really not as good in a lot of ways. I use it still sometimes, but I never will say it's better. Because if you use base clear and you use it the proper way, this is where everybody goes wrong. I'm going to explain this in this video. It can last a really, really long time. A couple of examples. People tell me even the new cars, it doesn't last as long. This is a Volkswagen. This has lasted since 2009. This car has never been painted. There's no place on it. It's delaminating, nothing like that. This car is a 2006 silver. Been in the sun at least half its life. I've only repainted the mirrors. That was it. They had some fading on them. They had the not delamination. The clear just wore off. Other than that, original paint, never been touched. So what is clear coat? Let's talk about what it is and then kind of reverse engineer it a little bit so you guys can understand why. Years ago, I used to say I always used single stage for solid colors, and then I would use base clear for metallics. Now a lot more, I'm using it on everything. And I'm going to explain why. And the reason why, in my opinion and my experience, it is better. And I'll explain, the first thing is the reason why it's better is for touch-ups. Okay, let's say you have a small accident with single stage, or you get a scratch in the paint or whatever, and you go to touch it up, you respray it. You have to spray and blend that area. In single stage, unlike base clear, when you spray and blend it, those blend areas usually start to fail first. Because never, even if you use the exact same color, let's say I had a scratch right here. If I use the exact same color and I painted this entire fender, the exact same paint, a lot of times, it won't match the other paint. So you almost always, in every material, have to spray and blend. So you spray out the area where the damage is, blend out, and on clear, you just clear the entire fender or whatever. With the other, you would try and either panel paint it, which you may or may not work, or you would, to get a color match, you probably wouldn't get it the same, or you'd spray and blend it, and the blend areas will start to fail, 5 or 6 years later. So that's my biggest pet peeve against single stage urethane or single stage paint. So let's get back to it. What is clear? Clear is basically a super, super thick UV binder. And so every paint, base coats, clear coats, or single stage urethane, all paints have something called binder that they're suspended in. And binder is supposed to help protect it from the elements. And when you have a single stage, the colorants are more exposed to the atmosphere. So what you'll see happen with a single stage is when it gets old, it'll start to oxidize on the outside a bit. And it happens less with single stage urethane because single stage urethanes are a little harder. It takes a little longer for it to happen with single stage urethane, but eventually it starts to oxidize on the outside. And then every year, every 6 months or whatever, you're chasing that. You're constantly trying to polish it off, wax over it. It just becomes a maintenance problem. You're just constantly trying to maintain. The paint job's failed. Okay, the paint job's no good. It needs to be repainted. But you're chasing it by thinking, oh, well, no, I can bring it back. You're not bringing it back. The paint job's dead. It needs to be repainted. So if you just keep stroking yourself thinking it's going to last longer by doing that, it doesn't really. It's already dead. The same thing happens over time with clear coat, is eventually the clear coat starts to wear away, and then it just wears away because of the heat, weather, the UVs do their job to it, and finally it starts to fail. And, then you see what people call delamination. And it's really not delamination. It's more of the clear is just starting to wear off, and then you see the exposed undercoats, and people go, well, see, yeah, I can bring back my urethane, but man, this this dual two stage, it delaminates. It's like, no, that also can happen for another reason. I'll explain a little bit later. When you see that kind of weathered off on the tops of the corners, that's basically the clear starting to wear off and starting to fail, which happens over time. Like I said, my cars, that's a long time. I don't know any single stage paint that I could buy off a shelf right now that would look like that in 20 years. It just wouldn't. In the sun all the time. It'd be flat looking. I'd be constantly having to go out there and polish it. And you could say, oh yeah, look, I got it back. It looks good, But you're just kind of, you're polishing a turd. Paint job's gone. You're thinking you got something longer out of it, but you really didn't. But the biggest problem I have, again, with single stage is if I go to try and retouch it, I got to blend it. And you always have to blend colors. I could get a scratch. I've got scratches in this I got to touch up. I'm going to get some scratches. I'm going to sand them out. I'm going to touch them, respray them, spray and blend the clear coat. And the clear coat, if it's done properly, will last longer than even a single stage blend. Again, because single stage paints, the surface, the binder that's in it, it's not able to do as much protecting as the clear coat does. Also, another problem when you're painting with single stage urethane is when you're sanding it, you're sanding off money. That's color you're sanding off. And color is a lot more expensive to make than clear. Okay, so if you get a good clear, again, you put it over a color, you're sanding off something that's less expensive. Okay, you have more problems and more possibilities of sanding through because the clears are a lot thicker. To use a good high solids clear, it's a lot thicker than even your single stage urethane, and you'll have more possibility of cutting through. You'll notice when you polish clear, if you get a really good high solids clear and you polish it, it is almost very difficult to go through on some of the edges. Or if you're going, it's a lot more difficult to go through the edges. Or if you're trying to color sand and buff single stage, you're going to find that it'll want to burn through the edges a lot easier. So even though it can buff much easier than clear, I buffed some single stage urethane, buffs a lot faster than clear coat does. But again, the reason why it's not as hard a surface. So that's why the clear usually will last longer if you use a good high solids clear. But every time you sand, that's just money falling off. Because like I said, let's say you buy single stage urethane and it's $250 a gallon or whatever, and you get, a gallon of color. You get a gallon of base coat, clear coat, and it's probably going to be more than enough. You probably don't need that much color, so you probably end up buying a half gallon of it to get the same coverage. And then because all you're trying to do is get the color on, you're not trying to do a build so that you can color sand and buff it, and you put your clear over that. So yeah, it ends up being a little bit more of a process to put on. And yeah, it also ends up taking a little bit more money when you do it. But you have less issues when you're trying to put the car back together, because now, if you do scratch it, which that's like normal. Okay. If you think you're not going to scratch it, some people don't, but that's, they can spend 10 times as long assembling something. But if you do scratch it, you're not going to be so upset that you're going to have to spray and blend something. And like I said, even though it's exactly the same paint, exactly the same color, occasionally it won't match. I've done this with the reds and stuff like that. You paint an area of red and son of a gun, same paint won't match. Same, you stirred it up just as good, everything was right, still won't match. So anyway, those are the issues. So this is where people will start seeing that clear fails and clear delaminates and clear does all this stuff. And I'm going to tell you why that you probably see that. I don't see that anymore. I did a long time ago when I first started using clear, and I thought, well, if I just put a little reducer in it, it sprays. But no, do not put reducer in your clear unless the can says, if it says 10%, I never even put in a full 10%. I'll put in 5. I will not over reduce clear. If you put any reducer in your clear, it's going to fail very quickly. I don't know exactly how it works in the chemistry of it, but something in that clear blows away with the overspray that needs to be there. And I was explained to this like a long time ago by a good company was explaining, I went to these classes and they explained how the clear coat can fail. And I had one fail. And then after that, because I stopped using any reducer, unless, like I said, if it says 10%, I'll put in 5. Like this clear here, 10%, I put 5% in max. And yeah, you can get a little more orange peel in it, but you got to do a little more work on your polishing. But it's worth it if it stays together and it lasts. So a lot of guys that say clear doesn't last as long as base, it's because they are putting too much reducer in it, or any reducer in some clears. Or the other thing they do is they're using a very low solids clear. If you use a really good high solids clear, if you use a good one, like this one's Tamco, it's a bit pricey now. I'm using something else at this point from here further because it's just gotten too pricey. But you can get a good, 44 to 56 to 59% solids clear, okay? And do exactly what it says on the can. If it says maximum of 10%, put in 5, and then tell me in 10 years, when the car still looks good, that the single stage would last longer. On all metallics, absolutely, it's a must to use base clear. Single stage metallics, you're talking about 2 years, 3 years, they'll start to fail. You can't buff them. There's nothing you can do. You try buffing a single stage metallic paint, you'll feel it looks all modelly and it looks weird. Now, the other thing is, I've rarely, unless you're using a really, really cheap clear, and this is another thing people do, is they get a clear, $60 a gallon clear, and they go, hey man, is this one any? It's like, no, you got to get the high solids. You got to know what a high solids clear is. That's what you need. It will last. The quality of the clear is really what makes a paint job. The base coat, to get a nice looking color or something like that, the base coat's really good for that. But you can use a cheaper base and use a really good, expensive, high solids clear, and it'll last forever, a really long time. Then again, I know people who keep their single stage urethane cars inside the garage, just like you do with your base clear, and they last a long time too. But again, the reason why the good clear can last longer is because the clear does only one thing. It's transparent and it holds out UVs. So it's basically 100%, if it's good clear, a binder surface to protect your colorant. So that's why it actually can be much better. I know the older guys always think that, because it's old school, we think, hey, it's better because it was the old way we did it. But, honestly, I've played this game enough to where I know that there's a reason why they use it on all the new cars. And its number one thing is for touch-up. Because if you can spray and blend a color and get it to look perfect, then that's much better than having a color that doesn't match. Number two, it's because a good thick binder coat to protect your colorant actually will last longer. It won't fade nearly as quick, when some of the colors will actually fade with single stage. Again, single stage urethane kind of is a neat little animal in there. As I said, sometimes I use it, but typically most of the time I'll use base clear because I know I'm going to scratch it when I'm putting it together. Then I'm going to have to spray and blend it, and that's not going to be as good as if I spray, blend it, clear it. So if you're really happy using single stage paint and that's just the way you like to do it, I'm not saying don't do that. Go ahead and do what you're going to do. But in the same respects, I wouldn't say that it's better than base clear, because it really isn't. There's no basis for that. There's no actual data that can show that a single stage urethane is better than base clear, because it's not. It's just a different way to do something. And the problems you're going to have trying to do that are going to probably outweigh the benefits as you do more painting. You know, back in the old lacquer days, lacquer really worked well for spray and blend, even on color. It would last quite a while. For some reason, even where it blended in, it would kind of melt into the old paint and stay looking pretty good for quite a while. But with these urethanes and the acrylic enamel, they just don't spray. When you blend it, it just doesn't last the same as if I put on base coat. Even, let's say, white. I had a white car and I had a scratch right here and I had to spray it. White never matches, just so you know. People think whites is white. No, there's a million different colors of white. So if I spray this area, but it blends really good. Same thing with yellow. If you get a scratch in yellow, you spray out a fender yellow, it'll look completely different than the rest of the car. But if I spray it and I blend it, yellow blends amazing. So does white. It blends really well. And you can't even see the blend in it or anything. It just blends right in. You can't even see it. But you really have to do that to be able to get it to look right, because your color's never going to be that perfect. It's just too hard to do. Nobody can have that kind of time. And this is why, again, why the body shops are using it. It's why all the new cars are all base clear. It's why the system has changed. It's because of touch-up. It's because it's easier. It's because it lasts as long or longer. And all those reasons there, in most respects, it's better. Now again, I'll tell you, sometimes I will use single stage urethane. I still will use it, but I'm not going to say that it's better. Never going to say that again, because I know that it isn't. When I've done base clear, it's lasted at least as long. A lot of times it looks better for longer. I have to do a lot less maintenance to it, because the other paints, when they start to fail, you're always polishing it and you go, hey, look, it looks good again. And 6 months later, needs it again. The paint's already done. It's over. The paint's wasted. It needs to be repainted. But you're just making yourself feel good. But, hey, man, I can buff this out again. No, it's done. It needs a paint job. That's just the honest truth. So anyway, I decided to make this video that if you're deciding what you're going to do, that you're going to need to know what the problems are by using a single stage. You might think you're getting something better. You're really not. Same thing with water base. Water base is just a base coat. It lasts just as long as solvent base. The thing is, on a old classic car, I sanded this whole car with 220 grit. See any sanding scratches in there? Just went over it with 220. That was my final sand. If I did that with water base, oh, it would just look terrible. It looked like big lines in it and everything. Because it's really, really, really thin. And you can build with the oil, with the solvent base. So for restoring a classic, the water base is a lot more work. But for spot work and repair, the water base is a lot less work. So a lot of the guys, because they can sand it with 600, if you got a good surface, let's say I wanted to repaint this and I sanded this with 600, it'd be really easy to repaint it and use water base over it. It'd be just as easy for me to use solvent, but for color match purposes, the water base for the newer materials and everything, for the colors they have, is much easier to match with. So that's why they're using it. So if you're concerned, you have your car at a shop and you're concerned that they're using water base, it's not going to last as long. The early water base had problems where it would delaminate from the surface. The stuff they have now, as long as it's over a primer, you can't put it over bare metal. That's a no-no. Okay, so there's a lot of rules you have to follow. But if you follow all the rules and you do it right, the water base can last as long as solvent base and be easier for the guy that's using it to match the color. So that's why they're doing it. That's why they use it. And the other reason is because it's VOC compliant for California stuff and all that. But it's actually, in a lot of states, they're using it too, just because it's actually easier to match the colors. So that's why. And there's nothing wrong with it. It works fine. It lasts for just as long as the other. There's no one's better than the other thing. It's just, there's a lot of stuff that's floating around out there that's just not true. So anyway, it just depends on what you're doing. If you're doing a brand new car, water base is great. Classic car, it's going to be a lot more work because you're going to have to finish sand with 600. Trying to finish all this just really bad surface that we've got, sanding it 3 or 4 times and putting more layers of primer on, making sure there's no bare metal. And then, putting that water base over. When a lot of this car, for instance, I shot down an epoxy primer, went right over that with base coat, went right over that with urethane, and I didn't sand it as much as I should have. And it's fine. It'll stick on there for years and years and years. It won't fail. In fact, we've got footprints up in here for walking all around in here while we're putting the glass in. And they just come right off. Well, that one's just sticky foot. So something sticky on there, but that'll come right off. A little bit of hand rubbing, like right here, comes right off. There's a little bit of I don't know, just something just needs to be washed off with some glass cleaner. A little bit of I think WD-40 when we put the glass in, and it's on his foot. And so anyway, but yeah, all that stuff will come right off of there. The paint's on there, it adhered really well, right over that one, because we put down an epoxy primer for an adhesion coat, and then right over bare metal in some areas, and then put down base coat right over that. And I don't think you can do that with water base. I think it would conflict with the finish and probably do some weird wrinkly or something. I don't really know those products that well, but I just know a little bit about them, and I know that they work. I have friends that work in body shops that use water base every day, and they like it, because it works great for what they're doing. So anyway, I decided to make a video on this subject. So you guys that, listen, like I said, you can use whatever you want. If you think it's better, whatever, just think it's better. It's really not, but it might help you if you know why. And then if you are using 2-stage, and maybe you did the right thing because you can touch up a lot easier. So I want to talk to you later. Talk to you next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.